Marcel, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Dion.
Today we'll be discussing the changes to the Residential Tenancy Act. You ready to get started?
Let's get into it.
There are over 130 changes to the Act. What is the purpose of these reforms?
Yeah, look, these are probably the biggest changes to the Residential Tenancies Act, probably since the Act's inception.
What do some of the regulations include?
Yeah, Dion, that's a really good question. I mean, we went through a document of 220 odd pages, which outlined and broke down these 130 changes. Here are some of the most important ones. So landlords are now known as rental providers, tenants are referred to as renters, and lease agreements are referred to as rental agreements. There are also changes in the information we can request a tenant provide us at the time they apply for a property. There have been introductions of a minimum standard for rental properties. I mean, these are quite reasonable expectations and ensure that things like doors have locks and properties are structurally safe and fit for use. There are new laws surrounding how we can end a tenancy and the notice we need to give when we ask a tenant to move out of a property. Renters will be able to do certain modifications to a rental property without the landlord's permission. Now, this is minor stuff. This includes things like installing picture hooks, child safety gates, and adding letterbox locks, or changing window coverings throughout the property. They've also introduced modifications tenants can request, which landlords can't reasonably refuse. Now, this includes things like painting walls, installing a herb garden, or adding fly screens, for example. Now, although tenants have the right to make these changes during their tenancies, they must make sure they return the property in the same condition as they leased the property initially. And they've also introduced mandatory checks of all gas and electrical appliances throughout the property, which must be done every 2 years.
Tell me a little bit about what is required with regards to gas and electrical safety checks.
This is a really big change, something that's now gone from a recommendation to rental providers to now being legislated. And what I can link it to best is smoke detectors. So it's now being legislated that your property must meet the minimum basic safety requirements as outlined in the Act. So gas and electricity services need to be checked every 2 years, and the dates must be provided to renters upon request.
Tell me a little bit about what is now required with regards to final inspections and bond claims.
Yeah, so this is another big change in the Act. Tenants will now be able to initiate a claim on their bond at the end of their tenancy. So as a rental provider, or us as agents, we need to ensure that we resolve the bond or initiate a claim for the bond through VCAT within 10 days of the tenant vacating. If we don't do that, the tenant can then apply to have the bond refunded to them on their own accord.
If people have any further questions about the changes to the Residential Tenancy Act, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, Dan, I'm sure the people watching this are going to have a lot more questions. We've only skimmed the surface on the Act, and there's a lot more to it. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to call the office on 9531 1000, and one of our team will be able to run through any questions you have and give you any of the answers or anything you're unsure about.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Cheers.